Hello and welcome to Dungeons, Dragons, and Discourse with Glen Old Man Grognard Haldstrom. That's you, Glenn.
Hello.
And myself. Hello. Oh, he's getting a sexy voice. That's not for my benefit, thankfully. And myself, Eric Tenkar. So, we always kind of run into the weeds on this show. And it's
but
not
they're
like
fun weeds. They really are.
Right. They are. And one of the things that I recently brought up on this channel is that there's a humble bundle right now for Paizo's Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And 2nd Edition Pathfinder has been out for 21 months. And this is the second humble bundle for it. And that means that pretty much if you want something for Pathfinder 2 and you've been watching Humble Bundle, you've had the opportunity to grab pretty much anything made in those first, 16 months for damn near next to nothing. Wait a second. Now I'm shrinking. It's like, what the heck? All right, let me get that angle better. So,
well,
go ahead.
Well, thinking about it, maybe they're trying to hit into a market that they haven't really had much traction on, which is not really true, but maybe they're trying to lean into, like, say, the VTT market.
And
because it is PDFs.
Well, it is PDFs. All right. And that's certain. But, at the prices of core books being $50 or $60, I don't see people going, well, I got all these PDFs for $20. Let me now get this stuff again in print. I don't see that happening. Now, the issue is, and I discussed this with Glenn shortly before we logged in for this, is that Pathfinder 1st Edition was a huge success. It outsold and had a greater following than Dungeons and Dragons did as an RPG when it was released, because D&D went from 3rd edition, or 3.5 to be more accurate, no to my son calling, and 4th edition was
which
not
tanked.
Something that Paizo, which tanked. And here's the thing too. Paizo had been publishing Dragon Magazine and Dungeon Magazine under license. So they already had the infrastructure in place to be their own publisher. So when they started writing on the wall, they were like, we don't want to be dependent on somebody else for our ability to publish. We're going to, and with 3rd edition being open with the system resource document and an open game license, the OGL, they were able to take the 3rd edition rules, I like to call it amped it up to 11, made D&D 3.75, named it Pathfinder, and it was embraced by the 3rd edition era of players that did not want to move on to 4th edition. Not that you can blame them. 4th edition was not a natural progression from 3rd edition to 4th edition.
At first, I thought it was nice until I got really sick of 3rd edition and 3.5. Then I said, well, why are you perpetuating an edition I really don't like? I mean, if you want me to play 3rd edition that I like, I will play Castles and Crusades. But anyway, that was me. And I think I dodged a bullet by not getting any of their main stuff. I never bought the core rule book. I didn't see the need. I came that close to buying it in digest size, but I didn't.
I actually bought I actually was subscribed because I had been a Dragon and Dungeon subscriber, even though I wasn't playing 3E throughout the years. Mm-hmm. So when they converted over to their own adventure path, I was still subscribed. And I actually subscribed, I think, for a couple of months to the Pathfinder rules. So I have some of the 1st edition rules. Never really dug into them too deeply. They were a bit too crunchy for me.
What I got, I admire for them is their peripherals stuff. I mean, I love with anything.
Oh, okay.
And I still have a stack of them out in the garage. But as far as the rules go, no. And the adventure path, I really never cared for because I felt like I was locked into a story, and it made it hard for me to do my own thing with them.
Right.
From what I've read a few of them. Yeah.
Well,
and that's one thing I can tell. Yeah, go ahead.
No, we got a comment, but go ahead. Finish it off your thought.
No, what I was going to say is I read a few of them because, if you walked into Half Price Books after about a year or maybe year and a half,
right,
you could not swing a dead cat without hitting any kind of Pathfinder modules or adventure paths.
Right. And I'm going to touch on something that John Miller just shared in our chat.
Yeah.
Regarding Pathfinder,
sure.
Eric previously suggested they switch to making 5e adventures. How many other major companies make a significant amount of their revenue from 5e products? Let me put it
besides Frog God?
Besides Frog God, Goodman Games, Troll Lord, Kobold Press, and I'm just talking about the companies that I know of because they also publish OSR stuff. There's a huge amount of publishers.
I was going to say, and that's the thing. It's like a side thing for them.
Right. But this is like with Frog God Games. The majority of the monies that they make are from 5th edition. They love Swords and Wizardry. And don't get me wrong.
It's their system.
It's their system. But the majority of their profits are coming from 5e. 5e allows them to write for Swords and Wizardry and employ people. Okay? Goodman Games. Yes, DCC is a successful RPG. Don't get me wrong. But Goodman has learned that their reprints are huge, because they're for 5th edition players, and the OSR people get to go, well, they're the original in it. I can look up. I got a new 400-page Keeping the Borderlands. Well, yeah, but the thing is, and John didn't realize that there's a lot of them doing it already. Yes, listen, I've said it before, and I'll say this again. I might not be a huge 5e fan, but 5e is the rising tide that lifts all ships. It is the money. It's the driver of this gaming industry.
No.
And it's not a bad thing necessarily. It's just that, and it's not just that it's the current system. When 4e was the current system for D&D, it was not the driver of the hobby. Paizo's Pathfinder, that 1st edition, drove the hobby. Back then, for Frog God Games, the majority of the monies were coming from Pathfinder releases. And again, Swords and Wizardry got to be published because Pathfinder was bringing in the money that kept the coffers full. That's an open secret. Bill Webb will tell you that. And again, Pathfinder, 1st edition, not a bad system. I don't know. I haven't even cracked open the 2nd edition book. I wouldn't necessarily play in either system. They're too crunchy for me. Excuse me. But I would play in a 5e game as a player, not as a DM. Too much crunch for me. But as a player, I think I could enjoy myself. Now, that being said, again, Pathfinder 1e was a response to 4e being rejected by the gaming community at large. Not everybody, but so many players did not want to move on to 4e. Totally incompatible to anything that came before it. Whereas Pathfinder 1e, to a large extent, was compatible to 3.5 D&D. If you had material from 3.5, you could port it over without too much issue. It meant that your stuff wasn't relegated to the garbage heap. Okay. Comes 5e. 5e suddenly takes the gaming world by storm and puts Wizards of the Coast back in the driver's seat, not just with the name Dungeons and Dragons, but with a viable system. How does that work? Well, it works because they actually went back in a lot of ways to old school game systems, the old school rules, and took some ideas from the old school rules to tone down the 3rd edition of D&D. Man, my allergies are killing me today. I apologize. I'm going to have to use my cough button next. So, but the problem with that meant that Pathfinder was losing market share. Now, Pathfinder does not share sales figures, and ICV2 sales figures are just placement charts. They don't tell you much. But I will give you figures, which I looked up, for fourth quarter from Fantasy Grounds and Roll20, which, although they are virtual tabletops, they've got a great player base, and it lets you see, in general, how people are playing games. Will this change face-to-face? Sure. Actually, it might undercount 5e in a lot of ways because of 5e organized play. But we'll touch that later. 5e on Fantasy Grounds, 71% of campaigns are 5e. Pathfinder 1 and 2 combined, 13%. On Roll20, 5e, only 53%. So you're like, all right, they're losing share. So and Roll20 is a more popular system than Fantasy Grounds. Roll20 numbers their users in the millions. So Pathfinder 1 and 2, 5% on Roll20. So they've lost market share. So does it make sense to do a Humble Bundle? Sure, if you need to make payroll, if you need to pay your bills, Humble Bundle is a great way to get immediate cash inflow, but it also kills your sales of any kind of backstock, at least your PDFs, and it will also deter people from buying hardcovers or softbacks of stuff that they've already gathered in PDF. Right. And for a young system, I mean, the system's been out for 21 months. They've had 2 Humble Bundles for it already. I personally think it's not a healthy sign for Pathfinder. I think it's huge for 5e. Now, going on to third-party publishing, the DMs Guild, there's a DMs Guild on DriveThru where you can use not just open game material, but you can go in and you can say, hey, I'm going to write something using Forgotten Realms material, or I'm going to go in using Ravenloft, or I'm going to go, and you can write official material. I say official, it's you have the rights to actually write in their sandbox. They take a much larger cut than they normally would if you were just using the open game license and you weren't using their copyrighted material. But that's another huge driver to third-party publishers, even ones that aren't using the DMs Guild to sell their stuff, because you're getting players, creators, or game masters used to the idea of buying things in PDF or print on demand. So that in and of itself, do I think the terms are outrageous? Yes. Between DriveThru and the cut that Wizards takes, half the money is gone. So if you're selling something for $4, you're only getting 2. So it's a sign. And David is like, what do you think about Pathfinder for Savage Worlds? Now, Glenn, did you see that Kickstarter a couple of months ago?
Oh yeah. That I was the first one to say so. I said it was a cash grab.
But what do you think about the Humble Bundle?
We've analyzed it, and we understand it's a win-win for both companies.
Yeah, and
because Savage Worlds doesn't really have a default fantasy environment, system, world, whatever. So instead of coming up with their own, hey, we'll just take, do the Pathfinder stuff. Now, right. I can understand, and it's cross-pollination. Maybe they'll get a few, regular Pathfinder gamers out of it, and Savage Worlds has a default fantasy system for themselves. So,
and
that's
my
take on it.
Well, and think of it this way. All right, and now Glenn and I are going to probably step into the weeds a little bit because we've been quoting numbers.
We're going to step into the squared circle.
Yeah, we're gonna go into the conjecture and making some theories here. But Glenn brought up that it was a win-win, not just for Pinnacle, but for Paizo to start doing adventure paths with material that's already been written and
the
converting
thought
it to
chills
Savage
my
Worlds.
bones.
I understand. I
mean,
understand that.
okay. Pathfinder, fine, but don't bring the adventure paths in it. Oh well, what are you going to do?
But here's the thing: it allows not just cross pollination. You're not going to convert Savage Worlds players to play Pathfinder. The systems. Yeah, I don't think you will. You might, but I don't see that.
I think you might. You get them to just at least try it once.
But what you get them to do though is say, "Hey, I really enjoyed this adventure path or whatever," right? Are there more coming? And what the thing is, because there isn't that a direct overlap, you're not technically helping a direct competitor, right? This is like, if we're going to go into it's like systems. Right. It's almost like, all right, well, I make cars. I'll make a deal with somebody who makes motorcycles, but I'm not going to make a deal with somebody or support somebody who also makes cars, because that would be dealing with my direct competition.
Right.
Now, 5th edition is certainly the direct competition to Pathfinder. Paizo's strength is no longer offering a system that is more accepted than the official Dungeons and Dragons system, right? 4th edition was largely not rejected by people that were playing 3rd edition. But when 5th edition came out, not only did 4th edition players mostly convert over, but a lot of Pathfinder players converted over to D&D 5e. And you no longer have people going, hey, listen, you don't have players who are playing 5e going, oh, I don't like this, I want to go to Pathfinder. You probably have Pathfinder players going, well, you know what, I can download my Crunch a bit and go to 5e. Maybe that's the sweet spot for me. So maybe. So you don't have that.
Remember, and also you got to remember that Pathfinder is still in its bones, in deep down, is still D&D.
Yes.
So it makes the 5e a lot simpler.
Yep. It's built on the OGO. Now remember, 5e is also offered under the open game license. 4e was not. 4e was built with the game system license, which was Wizard's attempt to lock the system down and have more control over it. Is 1e of Pathfinder still very popular? Sure. How do you know it's popular? Because of all the third-party publishers for 1e Pathfinder. But how many publishers are publishing for Pathfinder 2e? I don't see as much. I know Frog God did not say, oh, yeah, let's just convert our stuff from Pathfinder 1e to Pathfinder 2e. They're not. They're not publishing for Pathfinder 2e. They're still doing some stuff for Pathfinder 1e. But technically, 1e is a dead system. Technically. It's an interesting thing. Again, Pathfinder 1 was a response to people being upset with the official D&D rule set. Pathfinder 2 is a reaction to Pathfinder 1 losing customers to the official 5th edition of the D&D rule set. You're not going to get that customer base. So at the height, Paizo employed about 24 people. I got this from a number of sources in the community, and my understanding is they're down to about 6, and a lot of their creative staff have been poached as like freelancers by Wizards of the Coast. So that
no
becomes
surprise there.
Again, as Glenn says, am I a fan of adventure paths? No. Do I enjoy reading a lot of those adventure paths? My God, yes. I subscribed to them for years before saying, well, I'm never going to run them, but I enjoyed reading the story.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah, never going to run them, but what can I steal out of them?
Mm-hmm. Which Now we're going to go again into the weeds. If Paizo would finally say, you know what, we don't have an offering for nobody's angry at 5e except for us OSR players, but that's a whole other kettle of fish, right?
Oh yeah.
But nobody is saying I need an alternative to 5e and it's Pathfinder 2. People are not saying that. All right. And I know that I was told about my previous video on this topic was toxic because I dared talk down about Pathfinder 2. Well, listen, Pathfinder 2's strength is not the system. The Pathfinder 2 strength, or Pathfinder strength, or Paizo strength, is the material, the source material, the adventure paths, the lore for the settings. And this is stuff that can be converted easily to a new audience, a 5e audience. And for probably minimal output or minimal cost and a maximum output, it would be very profitable. Now, something that we didn't even touch upon, but it still rings in my head. Glenn, do you remember the Pathfinder MMO that was kickstarted a number of years ago?
Vaguely.
Right, vaguely.
That sort of just kind of mixed up in with like the D&D stuff that tried to, do that too.
Well, the problem with that was that 1 million, which people think like, wow, $1 million Kickstarter, and it funded. You're thinking, wow, that's great. It's funded. It was going to be. Well, no, that $1 million allowed them to actually put out a proof of concept because they needed funds from outside sources. Video games need sometimes tens of millions of dollars to succeed. So
that's right.
Really what the Pathfinder MMO did is it became, was it a money pit? It became a money pit for Paizo. So it's kind of like that perfect storm. When it comes to it, it's one thing that when you give an alternative to a system that people hate, but when you give an alternative to a system that people are loving, you don't get the same response. And again, I'm not trying to piss on Pathfinder players or Pathfinder fans. It's not a bad system. But again, you're not going to get the angry mob of anti-4e players converting over to it or running over to it. And therein lies the issue. Will Pathfinder probably always have a larger customer base or player base than all the OSR systems combined? Yeah, pretty sure of that. OSR has its own. It's a niche area, and that's we're fine with that. But Paizo can't.
Hey, we're having fun.
Niche. Yeah, but we're not. Yeah. Those are in it for the money. The OSR are small companies, and or one single man companies. Otherwise, people are publishing the OSR as a passion. Paizo's not.
I kind of smell. I know I'm not into the Pathfinder stuff, but I kind of smelled a rat when I saw them in the game store. Remember that box set they were selling, their beta or whatever it was, Pathfinder 2e.
They have a Pathfinder 2e beginner box, and I'll be honest with you, it's worth the money if you want to buy it.
It was called like a trial set or something like that.
Oh, okay.
And all I could think of. Yeah, all I could think of was the balls on this company putting your beta out and charging money for it. I mean, okay, you may be strapped to, come on.
Well, here's the thing. If I recall correctly, Pathfinder 1e also published a beta, but they pretty much put out the book at cost. It was like,
I don't remember that.
It was a soft cover book, full size. But it was I own it somewhere, but it was on cheap paper.
Yes. David said, I think Glenn's talking about the playtest. That's what I was talking about. They put the playtest out. Come on.
And so if you're gonna put out a playtest book that's like 500 pages long for $20 on cheap paper, that's fine. But if you're charging what would be full retail for a beta or a playtest version, that sounds to
that's what
me
they were
like
doing.
a bit of a money grab. Now, here's the thing, too. One of the best RPG products I ever bought, and I will always say this, was the Pathfinder First Edition Beginner Box. And I opened it up and I read the rules, and I was like, wow, this is a version of Pathfinder I would be willing to run. I was hoping, beyond hope, that it would come out with like an expert box, because that box was great. But not only that, it had all these pogs. So it was useful beyond just Pathfinder. It was just a great resource for me.
So they had a lot.
To
They had a lot
of stuff. Now they have one for the second edition, and it looks pretty good. I ordered it. I haven't dug through it deeply, but it looks like there's a lot of stuff that you could use outside of Pathfinder, which is great.
Oh yeah,
But,
yeah. John, reminds me of when TSR sold his catalog as a hardback book, and I remember that.
oh,
That was cash grabby too.
I missed that. Oh my god,
that was more desperate. That was more desperation than anything, because this is the '90s TSR here.
Right. Well, 90s TSR, we're a new box setting.
We need the money.
Yeah. Well, remember with the TSR in the 90s, Buck Rogers in the 25th century, as an RPG that was built off of the two. Do you remember why Buck Rogers was even published? Because
Lorraine Williams.
Right, but why? Why? Because she was right. She was one of the heirs to the Flint Dill family trust, and she basically licensed her own company material so she could get paid. So she was making money off the license to her company. Now, that being said, I will say probably the only computer video game that I really played to the finish was the Sega version of that, which you can't play these days, even if you have your Sega, because I'm sure the battery died in there and it won't save any games. But I actually finished that one. It was actually a lot of fun. A lot more fun than the RPG was. The Sega version, that was, again, under license. That's like, oh, God. But again, this is, folks, you all forget, well, we're fans, right? Primarily, we're fans. But publishers, ones that aren't hobby publishers, but ones that are doing this for a business, what comes first, the hobby or the business? It's a business. Why has Paizo not said, hey, there's an easy cash grab by publishing for 5e? Pride. Pride's the only reason why they haven't taken they
can see. Well, I can understand, because to them it looks like a step backwards.
Oh yeah,
they broke away from WotC, and they don't want to go back.
But you wouldn't have to go. You wouldn't be licensed. You just be publishing under the OGL. Now here comes the issue, right? And Bad Mike has brought this up, and he's tracked how Wizards of the Coast has like a record. I think it's like a 6 or 7 year cycle of rebooting systems for D&D, and it's how long an edition lasts before it gets rebooted. The 4e was rebooted a bit early because it wasn't doing much. So
it was terrible.
5e is coming up on that moment in its lifespan where folks could say, hey, maybe it's time for a new edition. I'm going to say that I've always been of the opinion that we are not going to necessarily get a new edition of D&D. We would get a new printing, kind of like Dungeons and Dragons edition 5.1. New printing, new wording, but fully backwards compatible.
Kind of like what Troll Lord does with Tunnels and with Castles and Crusades.
Right, which is
they never call it a new edition; they just call it a new printing.
Right, which is mostly, except for when they ended with the Barbarian class, I think it was mostly stamping out typos as they found it, and I think they're still finding. So I'll be nice. They're very good people there, but a word of advice coming from somebody who's
You'll
done
be
this.
nice.
I'm going to be nice. Do not edit your own work. Okay? Do not be your own proofreader. Get somebody that isn't you, that doesn't have your set of eyes, and allow them to proofread and edit, because you're the number of errors that will get through that section is going to be much lower when it's not you doing your own work.
This is how Tunnels and Trolls maintains somewhat coherently because of Liz.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you are right.
Yeah.
I'm like, what the heck is that? Really? It's the cat.
And I say somewhat coherent because I think the author kind of pressures her to leave a lot of his stuff in. That she likes it. I don't know.
Oh, Ken, I'm sure. I mean, and yeah. I think that, yeah, Ken San Andre probably has the no, that's got to stay. But even Tunnels and Trolls has gone through what, 8 editions,
something like that. Now they got Deluxe. Deluxe, which I've got to admit is probably the most playable version of the game. But I don't play that anymore. So anyway.
Listen, folks, if you haven't checked out Tunnels and Trolls, I would advise you should. And I'm going to tell you my suggestion, the most affordable way to get a version of the rules, go to the Flying Buffalo website and get, they should still have some of the Corgi solo adventure rule books in stock. They're like $5.95 or $6.95.
I used to try. I couldn't find any. I mean, the solo adventure things, yeah, but I wanted the main rule book and I can't find it.
Well, here's the thing. There are the Corgi rules. Those solos have a very great abridged version of the rules that is extremely playable. And it's a great way. It's an inexpensive way to check out the rules. Now, that being said, Glenn, you're looking for what, a copy of the 5th edition Tunnels and Trolls rules? You don't have one?
Well, remember the little paperback Corgi one, the main rules. I'm going to talk about it.
The I have one of the Corgi, the red cover rules. That my copy is beat to crap. I got it.
That's okay. I got disillusioned by Tunnels and Trolls. Although, in hindsight, I understand what they were aiming for.
Yeah, it's a quicker gameplay, and it was initially, I think, aimed at.
It aimed at solo game. It's always turning on solo games. See, I'm not into solo games, but I like the system itself. It's just that, I don't know how much Liz has to go through with Ken, but the explanation took me a long time to understand how I was supposed to go about doing this. Because there's a lot of, how shall I say, interpretation on the part of the game master.
Okay.
That you need to do. And also I find out when you run combats, you don't run everybody on one side and everybody on the other side. Like one of those, like the old Marvel superheroes going up against the villains. Boom. You can't do that and make it, it'll drive you crazy. You got to break it up into smaller groups.
Usually what happens with Tunnels and Trolls is where I find it breaks down is once you have missile weapons thrown into it, because they have their own way of being resolved and they don't get added into the combat adds of either side. It's awkward.
Yes,
now, to me, I would scratch my head, and that was something that would never come up in a solo, because a solo, you were always using melee weapons. But once you got into an adventure with other players, and by the way, my opinion is Tunnels and Trolls works best with 2 to 3, maybe 4 characters at the table. No hirelings, no henchmen. The smaller the party, the better, because it seems to break down. It seems to break down when you get too large. But it's a fun system. When I was in my teenage years, Tunnels and Trolls, it just uses D6s. Any game that just uses D6s, it isn't Traveler.
Let me introduce you to Champions.
Well, no, bucket of dice. I remember playing that game. I was like, we don't have enough D6s.
That's D6s. That's D6s.
I need my risk set. I got to break out risk so I can have enough D6s to play Champions. And then of course you had Star Wars, which I enjoyed. My players didn't enjoy it much, so we didn't play too much Star Wars, sadly.
I have problems with. I mean, I love D6 Star Wars, but as long as I'm just playing it,
right?
I thought the rule books were really good, but they were kind of dry.
Yeah, they were almost written as historical reference material, as opposed to
like they seemed like kind of like technical manuals or something.
Right. Yeah. No, I would not disagree.
But the game system's great.
One bit.
I mean, game system's great though.
You can actually grab the game system itself, the OpenD6 system. You can do a search for it online. OpenD6 fantasy space adventure for pulp games.
They have fantasy space. I used to have a copy of those. I had a big old debate with my friends who like playing D6 Star Wars. I said, "Isn't this just D6 Star Wars with the file numbers filed off?"
Yes.
Serial numbers filed off.
Again, it was when they designed that system for Star Wars. It was a great system, and then when they lost the license,
that's because it started as Ghostbusters.
It was a well done, coherent system that wasn't overly complicated, yet still had enough flex to do force and blasters, and it was cinematic. All right, we'll put it to you that way, folks.
It was very cinematic.
So
that's the first time I saw in media res in a game.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't know the concept until we played the sample adventure, and immediately you were in the middle of the mix because they were trying to do it just like the movies do, because you usually end up in the middle of the mix in the beginning of it. And it's like, and that was a revelation to me. Wow, I can do that to my players? Wow. That's great.
I've tried it in Swords and Wizardry. Doesn't work as well.
Really?
Yeah. Maybe
depends on how you do it and what you're doing it.
If you're starting a new campaign with new players and new PCs, yeah. Mm-hmm. If you are doing it in the middle of a campaign, they feel like they've lost some kind of power over their own actions.
Continuity.
Continuity. It's like, well, how did this happen? Like, especially, God forbid, you take your players and you're like, well, you all wake up in a cell. Well, huh?
Yeah.
Most PCs will not get arrested. Tell me, Glenn. Tell me.
Funny you should mention that. I just did an episode of Radio Grognard kind of about that. I said there are a lot of things that players hate. Things like being taken captive and things like that. Uh-huh. But I said probably up there, maybe not number one, but up there in like the top 5 is when they do this whole thing and the GM says, and you wake up. It was a dream. Players hate that.
The good old Dallas. Well, the whole season of Dallas was a dream, right?
I proposed an idea. I posed an idea of starting a game in the middle of a module or in the middle of whatever you wrote up, and say, don't go any further, like the third of the way in, and start them. It's the old, what I like to do. Okay, you have your characters. You ready? Everybody roll for initiative. And they're in the middle of a fight or something. They don't know the characters. And then I said, okay, make it a minor fight like say a random encounter type fight where they have a really good chance of beating them, and then or some other way they're hiding, they're being chased or whatever. And at one point after the fight or whatever, you say, you guys wonder how this all started? Let's go back to the beginning and find out. And then you start the game from the beginning. Now that is challenging not only for the players but the DM. One, he has to do it right, and two, you got to see a way to hook this up to what just happened,
which isn't easy.
And it what?
It's not easy to do.
What'd you say? No, it's not easy. And I said, that's why I said this is not for newbie GMs. This is something if you played for a little while. But anyway, that and I thought it was kind of a radical idea, but I put it out anyway. I'll probably put it, let's see, tomorrow, probably in Sunday's show. He's probably going to win his plays. But that was my radical idea. I'm sure you've had ideas like that too. What can I do different with my characters, with my characters?
Well, yeah, and honestly, you're right. If you are going to start them out in the middle of the action should not be one that is going to be hard for them to overcome. It shouldn't be, an evenly matched. It should be like, or something like they're getting mugged, but they're getting mugged by the third level characters, and the muggers are 0 level thieves or something like that. Where initially they're going to be apprehensive about that, and they're going to realize quickly, we can handle this. And that's going to be, why did this happen? They might not even realize that you started them out in the middle of the action. They might latch onto it. But if you put them into the middle of the action with something that's like run down their hit points down to half or less, and there's like, maybe one of the PCs is unconscious, and now it's going to be like, this is how we started. It's not fair to the players, and it's not fair to you as a GM. But really? I could definitely, could I see you starting, like I said, with a challenge that is not all that strong, but they're not going to know that right away because it's happening right there immediately. So it's, as the battle goes on, they'll realize, okay, this wasn't that difficult.
Because I was looking for more.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's an effort to get them immersed in the world right away. For me,
yes, and I think it is certainly a very valid way to kick off a campaign. The old listen, we've all done it. Probably multiple times, if not every time. You're all in a bar, and you see the notice on the corkboard that old wizard Fizz Bangleboots is looking for a hearty party of adventurers. But there is no party of adventurers. It's just individuals looking for adventure. You could put your names on the list. It's like, how often have we done that? Probably too much. But again, it's another thing to start the players off, even as, all right, listen, you were all hired as cavern guards, and it's been uneventful, and then all of a sudden, and it's like, what do I wait? Where? Yeah, they were expecting to be like, I got time to buy more shit or whatever, and it's like, wait a second, I'm what? I'm doing what? So yeah, I can definitely see that, Glenn. I can see that work real well.
Yeah, and there was, and thank you, David. He said he had the same very same idea. Good. I'm not crazy then.
Well, that doesn't mean you're not crazy, Glenn. It just means that this was a very sane idea of yours.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So media hit piece, huh, on D&D. Nice.
Yeah. Well, that's nothing new, right? I mean, we've had that for years. Less so now. Now it's all like, they're nerds and geeks, and that's great. But the hit pieces no longer come from the standard media. The hit pieces now come from our nerd media, right? they come from Kotaku and other places, and it's like, oh well, D&D
those are the
play. Well, these are the places that will
still think
search it.
They still think we're playing like Mazes and Monsters.
No. Kotaku these are the geek sites that the ones that ABC,
right,
CBS, Fox News. They'll write the article like, oh well, Dungeons and Dragons has 10 million players within the United States, and they'll just talk about the business aspect. But then you have the geek sites, the geek news sites that'll go, oh well, it's obvious that there is a problem of racism within the gaming community because there are not enough players of minority background. Not enough equity. Those are the articles that we get hit pieces from within our community, as well as before it was from outside the community. Go figure that one
out. You can't steal it. It belongs to Eric. He's got copyright. No, go ahead.
Actually, I've used this one in the past, and it works out fairly well because it's a reason for characters that don't necessarily have any kind of connection to give them a connection. You were all hired as caravan guards individually, right? And the caravan.
No, we're not telling.
If you really want to do it, the first thing that should happen is that the caravan guard sergeant or captain dies in the first round. So now the players have no way that nobody's going to tell them what to do. Now they have to make decisions to keep the caravan safe. They've got to make the decisions that go after this, go after that, and now it becomes on them. They can't defer because players do one of two things with authority. They either resist or they submit. And you don't want them necessarily resisting in the middle of combat as to be given instructions, but at the same time, you don't want them submitting because then you've taken away, the player's freedom of action. Agency. Thank you, Glenn, because I couldn't think of the damn fucking word. But
I did the same thing.
By taking away the individual that would be their immediate supervisor, listen, is the caravan master going to yell at them, "Save my shit"? Of course, but he's not going to be giving them tactical advice. He'll be hiding under a cart. That's the situation that you want your players into, your PCs in.
Right.
Something that's happening immediately, and they're making the decisions. And that first encounter, without going into any depth here, but that first encounter should be one that isn't hard to overcome, but should leave clues that there is a much greater threat that they need to investigate. And then take it from there.
Yeah, that's true. Now, John here says in Media Ray seems like it would require a railroad at some point to get the adventure to link up with the first scene. You're right. If you were a bad game master, if you didn't have the experience, and I'm not saying it's going to be easy either. Now, I also think that if it doesn't hook up, I am not opposed to retconning or restarting the whole thing. Because you're going to start, if you're going to do how did we get to here? You already started at the beginning.
Right.
So, yeah, this sounds like a little bit of backpedaling. Yeah, I know. But the point is, I think if you're good at it and you've had some experience, it may work. I'm not saying it's the best thing to do, but it sure gets the people into the game.
Right.
So
what I would say,
I'm doing it with a caveat, basically.
Yeah. Again, if you're going to do something like that, start it with action. Don't start it with you wake up at a cell with all your armor and weapons removed. Unless it's a convention game, right? It's a one shot. Then that's fine.
Or if it's a first adventure with newbies.
Or if it's a first adventure, you could do that too. But you don't do that in the middle of a campaign because your players will fucking want to kill you. You're gonna be nailed. They'll make a cross to nail you to it. I mean, and with probably good reason. John Miller, that raises a good question. despite 5e's great success, will it be destroyed by the woke left or whatever we want to call it? I
Not if
don't
we can
know,
help it.
and I would guess that even Witches of the Coast doesn't know just now. I think that from what we've seen with Witches of the Coast, there are multiple messages. If you want to, if I was somebody to read tea leaves, a Magic 8 Ball, it would say something like,
Answer
"It's
unclear.
cloudy.
Try
Ask
again
it."
later.
Answer unclear. Ask again later. I don't think that they quite know. And here's the thing: when it comes to corporations, all right, do they hear the loudest voices? Yes, the loudest voices. Whether it was the silent majority when I was younger, or whether it is, quote, the woke left in my adult age, these are the silent majority was a minority, and they weren't very silent. And
That's
the
right.
woke left is a minority, and they aren't very silent. But what happens is when these decisions that they make based upon these loud voices affects their bottom line, in the end, especially with corporations that have to report to their stockholders, they will self-correct at some point. There will be a point where they kind of don't quite know what they're doing, and they think that these loud voices, the Twitter mob, is valid. But when they wind up losing, it's okay. My allergies are killing me.
My allergies are, I'm getting an itch in my eye.
But when they realize that the vocal, loud minority is costing them business, they will generally right the ship, or as should probably happen, they will go down with the ship. So it generally self-corrects.
By the by, I noticed that I saw a couple of copies of Curse of Strahd Reloaded out there. I can imagine what they did with that one, even though it looks like a nice set. Mr. Tenkar, I cannot hear you.
I forgot. I put my cough button on and it didn't come off. I heard that with the new Ravenloft set that I don't have it. Just what I read on social media is that they changed the genders of some of the characters and or powers, and while the gender swapping wasn't really a huge issue, it changed some of the dynamics without really explaining the dynamics being changed. I guess if you're into continuity, I guess it wouldn't necessarily be a perfect choice, but I don't know. I was never a huge Ravenloft fan beyond the first box set. I thought the first box set had enough to.
Well, I played Curse of Strahd, and we had a good time.
I'm not saying that you wouldn't. And I ran the Pinocchio knockoff adventure for Halloween like twice, where the players get turned into marionettes or something like that. I can't remember too well. It's been
I love it,
years.
David. Thank you. Yes, get rid of the tieflings and probably the dragonborn too. If you got rid of those two races, you'd lose a lot of the woke crowd.
Well, here's my thing. All right. Tieflings, we first saw them in Planescape, and I have a certain affection for Planescape, so I can tolerate them. It's the Dragonborn that I can't tolerate. I would rather have Lizardmen. But it's like I always wanted to play a dragon, so I can play a Dragonborn and a Dragonkin, and do I get a breath weapon? No, none of that shit in my game. I'm sorry.
In the Monday game, you know what Gage is having fun with, because we're playing 5e. We're playing 5e Eberron. He's going to town on that Warforged, man. He loves the Warforged. I like the Warforged too, for that matter.
Aside from owning the core book for Eberron, my only experience with Eberron was playing DDO, Dungeons and Dragons Online, which I played the shit out of initially. Oh my god, I really enjoyed playing it, but then the problem with that, it didn't have enough material when it first came out. So once you finished, you can only repeat the same dungeon so many times before it becomes mind-numbingly chilling. It's like, I know where all the traps are. I know everything else. It's like, I can solve this now. I don't want to do this anymore. It wasn't like other MMOs where you could explore the outdoors much. David.
I still have the core book from 3rd edition, and I think I had Sharn City of Towers, and that's about it. I never played it, but I read it, and it's like, okay, I can deal with this, even if it is 3rd edition, because I like pulp, and I like pulp D&D, and the Warforged kind of fit into my idea of steampunk fantasy.
Yeah, and really Warforged are balanced by their restricted healing ability, which kind of balances out their built-in strengths. It's like, yeah, but you don't get to heal like the regular person gets to heal. You don't get the same benefits, and I think that balanced it out. At least that's how I experienced it in DDO, and I thought that was a pretty good way to balance out their strengths. David Betsack, I think Chad is reading my comments. Anyway, I read Wizards of the Coast is changing Drow to fix their problematic racial issues. Well, if you look at the artwork that is now being used to depict Drist or Drizzt, I don't remember how to pronounce it. The ranger with the wolf. Yeah. He's gone from a black to like a purplish color. Whatever. I don't have an issue with that. And if you want to say, well, not all Drow are evil, that's fine, because obviously Drist wasn't evil, and he wasn't evil 30 years ago when the fiction with him started. Again, I don't have an issue with that. You can still say the vast majority of Drow are evil. Awesome. It's also a matriarchal society, right? Drow females, Drow women are not just the ones in power, but they're the ones that have all the benefits when it comes to classes available and levels. Going back to 1st edition, they flipped the script. Because if you could complain about 1E, it was like, well, if you were a 1E female player and you wanted to play a female fighter and you rolled 1800 strength and the DM tells you, sorry, that was a great roll, but you can't be better than 1850, you'd be suitably pissed off. But if you were playing a campaign using the Drow or the Drow, I don't know how you want to pronounce it, with Unearthed Arcana rules, and you were a male character, you were like, unlimited to what? And it's like, yeah, well, you could play a female and be virtually unlimited as cleric or magic user. I have an issue with having real statistical or class abilities or limitations being based upon gender in a fictional fantasy game. Do I have an issue with it in like the fire department or the police department having physical requirements? No. I weigh 220 pounds. I want a firefighter who can carry my ass out if needed, not go, oh, you're a fat fuck and I can't lift you up. I need help. I need somebody that's physically fit. And the majority of men couldn't probably throw me over the shoulder and pick me up. I understand that. And if a woman can, then she should be allowed. Again, but fantasy is different. Fantasy is we let that stuff go to the side. So,
yeah.
Oh man, I think I'm
exactly.
I think I've fallen behind here. Hold on a second.
It's all right.
David wants to get rid of Dragonborn and Kender. Kender should never have left it. The Kender were great as a piece of fiction, but as a piece of campaign, leave them as NPCs, and then you can kill them as you need them.
Well, I kind of think that they should left them in, like I said, left them in Dragonlance.
Yeah, they didn't need to. And if you needed to pull them out of Dragonlance, that's when the DM does it. All right. Well, you know what? It's a what I will allow an exception. There's no rate. You somehow came through a portal because you are a Kender and you get your ass into trouble all the time. So yes, you are, but there's no others of your kind. You are alone, and people are going to think that you are some kind of mutated halfling. And they're going to call you a halfling, and you're going to say you're a Kender, and they're going to tell you you're just a crazy halfling.
That's right.
And leave it at that. David Thompson, Rust Monsters, and Warforged. Yeah, that would be
that would be a
WD-40. Yeah, I need some WD-40, please.
You know what's so funny about that?
Ooh. Sorry, go ahead.
Nobody last Monday's game. We were in some kind of dungeon thing where some kind of tower, and they said this was a training room. I said, do they have that stuff like, when you're training to fight, you have like wooden swords and stuff like that? He says, yeah. So I'm going to. Well, I didn't tell anybody why I wanted it. He said, okay, because I have the feeling we're going to run into rust monsters. What's better than a wooden sword?
There you go. You just beat it to death. Come on. John Miller, the Dungeons and Dragons YouTube channel, just released an animated short yesterday featuring Drist. At least they're still making use of the character, narrated by Benedict Cumberbatch, if you can believe. By the way, Benedict Cumberbatch is one of the best names in the industry, just to pronounce, because it just sounds so Benedict Cumberbatch, so official. But I gotta have to check it out.
He's Dr. Smaug, Strange.
Yes, great name. Let's see. Who else? What they're changing is that only this small group of Loth worshippers is evil. You know what? That is whatever. That could be retcon. Yeah, you know what? When we come to the AD&D rules, you look in the Monster Manual, it's like dwarves, lawful good. Well, no, dwarves could be any alignment. And if you went to a dwarven society, you could assume that the society would be lawful and generally good, but maybe it's going to be lawful and neutral. They're not worried about the good. Or maybe it's going to be a society where everybody's out for themselves. And although they're lawful in the idea that they're organized and that they have a set of rules, they would be what we would consider in our society unlawful because they're just a bunch of evil bastards, right? It could happen. Mm-hmm. You don't need the Durgar, the dwarves that can suddenly grow to 6 feet tall or 8 feet tall, whatever it was, to enable that. You could easily have that as part of the fiction.
That's what you have the Snurfleblin for.
Well, those are the evil god gnomes. It was the Durgar with the evil dwarves.
Why don't you just name a mental plick and say the hell with it?
Yeah. Make them say the name backwards, right? And then they disappear.
They go away. Yeah. That'll work. Listen, hey, I ought to do that. I think I'll do that next time we use them. Deep gnomes.
Say the name backwards. Make them say the name backwards, and then they have to disappear.
It's like saying Rumpelstiltskin. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, think about it. Could you have a wood elf enclave? Wood elves, neutral, that were evil? That they decided to eat sentient flesh. Sure. I mean, there's a history and a reason for it. Do I see? I still could say, drow should be in general evil, but could there be whole communities of drow or drow that are not evil, that are neutral? Sure.
Why not?
Listen, my feeling has always been is that even orcs and goblins, you take them out of their environment, and they will generally lean more toward their lawful chaos axis as opposed to their evil axis. So a lot of multiple times in my campaigns, my players have captured goblins or kobolds and kept them around. And then as time went on, their evil tendencies, they never became good. They weren't going to be like, oh, I'm going to do benevolent acts. They were more, I'm going to do acts that are beneficial to me and maybe the people that are protecting me, my party. So I would say, all right, so he was technically lawful evil. Now it's lawful neutral. I always kind of saw my humanoids, unless you're playing them as almost like cartoon characters, that the assumption to me was always it's lawful neutral with evil tendencies for my orcs, or it's chaotic neutral with evil tendencies for the ogres, or however it goes, because the extreme alignments are not can't succeed in society. Even a lawful good society, an absolute lawful good society, is not going to succeed. An absolute chaotic good society is not going to succeed because there's no shades of gray. So you need those shades of gray for these places to be successful. And I don't have a real problem with changing the drones. They don't make them good, make them a neutral society. And then they can work whatever access based upon the environment they're in. I'm kind of okay with that. Sorry, I'm just trying to catch up here. Kender would be killed in the first session.
Are you doing that?
Yes, I'm putting up the words on the screen.
Say the word and you'll be free.
Let's see. Dwarves are lawful Scottish. That's David.
Well, I know. I played a Russian dwarf before.
You know, I've always seen the dwarven mindset of staunch instructions and rules to be almost classic German. You will listen, you will do, you know, and but I would play
like
them
to drink ale.
I would play them with a Scottish lilt to them, but you know. I could see it. I could see it working.
Yeah, Russian Dwarf is fun. I played that in an online game.
Russian Dwarf?
Russian Dwarf, yes. You will hold still while I cut your head off.
I could see such. I guess could you have been doing it? Hey, paisano, what? Hey, come here. I could see
Italian,
Italian, but you'd have to be like
all my halflings. Yeah, but all my halflings are Asante Jews.
Of what?
They're all Azanki Jews.
Oh, okay.
They're all altar cockers. Yes. Yeah, you want some information? Come here. I got some information for you.
What do you want? Well, I got what you need. Would I lie to you?
What are you talking? I'm trying to help you. You don't understand. I'm trying to help you.
It's like Mel Brooks.
Murray, come over here. You don't understand. What?
You sound like Mel Brooks playing one of his characters. I have these 10 commandments. Great movie.
I didn't get a harumph out of that guy.
Yes, harumph.
What? You watch your ass. Harumph for the governor. I can't pronounce. Thank you, John. I just can't pronounce that.
Ashkenazi.
Thank you. They're mostly Russian, aren't they?
I believe so. Actually, there's a good. I watched a good video series on the Hasidic Jews in Brooklyn from an outsider. It was actually very good. And I experience it more than most, I guess, because I'm a New Yorker and we experience a lot of different cultures, and we have a lot of neighborhoods that are Russian, Orthodox Jewish, conservative Jewish, Polish Catholic. So these little communities prop up, and New York is literally a melting pot. I
am not canceled. You just don't have to watch.
Well, John, here's the deal. Okay, you can't cancel Glen or I because we are retired. All right, we don't have standard employment, and that means you can't cancel.
Why do some people? I'm retired. Why do some people pronounce it retarded? I don't understand that.
Well, it was we're not counting what you were before you retired. It was just saying that now you are retired. All right.
Yes.
But folks, you can't cancel either one of us because you can't affect our income. It doesn't happen that way. So I can be honest.
True.
All right. And I can honestly say that I live in a community that historically has more languages spoken within my community than any other zip code in this country. More languages.
And if I can't do my voices, I get really cranky.
Right. I play with voices too. So I used to play with my Irish brogue until this is years ago. My God, over 20 years ago, I used to go to my local pub on my precinct in the South Bronx. Yes, an Irish pub in the South Bronx. And I was doing my Irish brogue, and my bartender came to me. She's like, listen, if you're going to do an Irish brogue, do a proper one because you sound like a fucking leprechaun. And we don't serve fucking leprechauns in me pub. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry. I apologize, Bernadette.
The only trouble I had was on an online game with Vince. And he was somebody, I think he was running, Oriental Adventures. And I came up with a standard Chinese accent like this. And he says, could you not have your character speak much? And I said, okay.
Yeah, it does raise a good question. And you know what? The ones that are generally acceptable to use are regional accents within the United States.
Usually first world, Western world accent.
Right. So you can do anything from the British Isles, Italian, French, German, Polish, maybe not. Russian, yes, we can always do Russian. You can do any of the local dialects in the United States.
I've used a dozen dialects and accents and haven't even left the U.S.
Yeah, so there's a lot and listen, when I was in high school, I used to do different accents or different inflections on my speech. And I was working retail and selling electronics. I would occasionally slip into it if my customer was from the UK. And all of a sudden, I didn't realize I'd slipped into what apparently was a bit of a Cockney. It was like, do I hear Cockney? I was like, oh, bugger. Oh, it's always blame your mother's side of the family, by the way, if you get caught using an accent that doesn't really apply to you. Because they can never guess from your last name what your mother's side of the family is. And it's like, oh, yeah, my mother was born in London. Oh, North Side? I'm like, I believe on the North Side. I haven't been there in like 20 years. So it's like, oh, I recognized it. It's like, oh, geez, thank you, God.
Here's a story. When I met Becky, my wife, I met her on the internet, and I wasn't using any accent or anything like that. And I talked to her on the phone, and she told me, now I'm from LA, okay? The land of no accent. She was convinced I'm New York City. Just because the way I talked, the way I used, it wasn't an accent, it was just the way I used my words.
Okay. Well,
there was an attitude. I guess there was an attitude in there that she picked up on.
Part of the way New Yorkers tend to use their words is if a word is longer than 2 or 3 syllables, we tend to shorten it because it just takes up too much time to say it. So just condense the word down. You don't have to talk fast. Just talk.
That's why I used to say when people got on me for saying black instead of African American, I just turned to them and said, "That's too many syllables."
I'd have to I'd have to agree with that because and it's a weird situation because again, I
Look,
went to
I've
school.
grown up in an area where people would, the older people would say colored still.
Right.
And I ain't mentioning the N word because that's where I draw a line.
Well, I think YouTube would draw the line on that one too. Actually, kind of.
Oh yeah.
But yeah.
Oh yeah.
But
oh yeah.
like I said, my neighborhood in Queens for the last I don't know about the 2020 census yet, but I know like the last 3 or 4 censuses has always had more languages spoken in this one zip code than any other zip code in the United States. And I experienced that growing up. I lived in this zip code, and it's always been multiple nationalities. And I always heard so many accents because a lot of people were immigrants. It's an immigrant neighborhood, and that's fine. I think I personally think it's the spice of life. If I need to escape from a neighborhood that's full of immigrants, I can go to Poconos where everybody's been there for like 7 generations. Jeez, but it is okay.
Yeah,
John,
I understand that.
John, yeah, we're getting too deep into the weeds on this one. It is used by members of the ethnicity to refer to themselves. It should be accepted for others to use it as well, but there may be newly emerging taboos that break this rule. Listen, here's the thing, okay? In today's society, there are numerous rules that are coming up that nobody knows about because they are thrown out by unofficial creators of rules, and then they are imposed on the rest of the world. I am who I am, all right, and I'm going to speak as I've spoken my 53 years of existence, and I do not speak to offend anybody. I don't mean to offend anybody, and if I offend somebody, I apologize. And if I truly offend somebody, which I have, not because of any kind of racial, ethnic comment, but back when we had the Adventure Tournament of Rapists, I don't know if you remember that horror story. That's the name of an adventure I want to publish. Not. I made what would be considered probably a stupid joke about rape, and I actually offended somebody who had been raped, and I fell on that sword and made a public apology because you know what? You can offend people without realizing it, and if that happens, I do believe if you are confronted with it or you are told what happened, if you can make amends, make amends. Again, I'm not looking to offend people, but at the same time,
why not?
At the same time, if every word you have to say, you have to consider what it is before you say it, you're going to wind up saying nothing, and you're going to wind up writing nothing. And I think that in and of itself is scary. It's the whole thing of if you overthink stuff, then you can't think. So again,
yeah, which brings us back. Brings us back to gaming, where orcs are minorities that are
which they never have, which
is stupid.
That is. And here I'm really gonna step into the weeds on this one. I truly
embrace the weeds. Embrace the weeds.
Well, my opinion generally is that it is well-intentioned white individuals, there I said it, who feel that they need to speak for the rest of society, not other white people. They are speaking for individuals that they feel can't speak for themselves, that all of a sudden say this is no good and that is no good. And, not for nothing. Just like I have my own opinions on things like abortion, but I don't think that my opinion should be held in higher esteem because it's not the decision that I will ever actually have to make being a male. So
right.
when it comes to things that affect blacks, Hispanics, Chinese, people of different genders, they should be the ones speaking up, not some well-educated jackass elitist who believes that they know better for people that they probably see as lesser and can't decide or fight for themselves. So I would, again, I put a lot more value on words that come from people within that community than jackasses.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to lead this back. I'm going to lead this back.
Please lead us back.
And pick on again Tunnels and Trolls. Mm-hmm. One thing that really changed in Trolls is its monster section, which is all of 2 pages, and it started out with this thing about how monsters nowadays have more rights, and it was like woke before he was woke. This is Ken going on about how some monsters are just creatures trying to get by and all this other BS that I really hated him for putting in that, because for several reasons. One, it's woke crap. And two, you're just using an excuse not to write a monster section.
Well,
and that really chafed me. And then when he did Monsters, the revision, it's like, there's where his sympathies lie. There's where he'd rather play a monster than a PC. Why don't you just come out and say it? Why didn't you just come out and say it?
You know what? You're Glenn, you're calling TNT Tunnels and Trolls woke for that, but at the same time, Tunnels and Trolls.
Well, it's like pre-woke. It's like,
but you do realize that the rules that you can't find, the Corgi rules, right? They were the first rule set, right. The first version of the TNT rules to say we have to change the names of these spells because they are patently offensive. And which of the spells were that?
Okay.
Do you know what spell it was? That was besides
I know.
And besides poor baby being the healing spell and take that, I think maybe take that, you fiend. But it was the charm spell. We have
Yes,
Amasa, which let's be honest, is extremely offensive, and obviously so. And it didn't get taken out of the rules, I think, until Deluxe. So there's a whole weird thing going on there. Again, I don't have any insight into how Ken's mind works or where he lays on the spectrum. It really makes little difference.
I've got an inkling though.
Yeah, but it really makes a difference. But something like that stayed in the rules for, I don't know, nearly
how many editions?
35 years. I mean, that tells you something, and that's something that, again, here I am, general individual, saying, yeah, I could see how that could be considered offensive to somebody. I'm sure
I understand.
When Ken wrote it back in the 70s, he thought it was kind of cute. But, sensibilities do evolve. They do change. Again.
But that whole monster thing was just, it's like, and I could tell he really didn't care for this game. He'd rather play Monsters, which is the same game, only flipped around.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's like the monsters are people have been taken to court over the rights of monsters and stuff. Oh, give me a break, will you? Come on. Monsters are there to fight.
But you know what? In the barely touched upon default setting of TNT, you could have trolls as a shopkeeper. It wasn't like
he did. Yeah, he's right. He was talking about enlightenment, but he was going a little overboard on it.
Yeah, but here.
And you know what's fun? You know what's funny? I did not, until I got the deluxe GM screen, did I find any chart on stats for monsters anywhere.
Really?
Because he expects you to make them up on your own. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, it's a huge thing to that too. And again, I mean, The default in AD&D or Dungeons and Dragons has always been the core fantasy races, and you don't expect to go into Waterdeep or Greyhawk and see a troll work in the counter. You know, you don't
I have no
expect to
problem.
see. You could, but you don't expect to see it.
Yeah.
Whereas in Tunnels and Trolls, you don't bat an eye, and you could be a troll as a PC in Tunnels and Trolls. It was one of the races that you
That's
could
true. That's
actually
true.
choose. So different assumptions, but again, the original rules, the rules from many editions, had parts that were offensive enough that a UK edition printed in the 80s was like, we got to change the name of the spell. They can't say like this, you know. But
yeah, I'm in agreement with that.
Lasted for years. Now, John Miller says, arguably, the evil humanoids and demi-humans should never have been allowed as PC races in the first place. I wonder if this would ever have become an issue. Well, you know what? And it's weird how the game evolved. And I say the game, I'm just going to talk AD&D. 1A, you could be an assassin, right? And you could be evil characters. You went to 2E, you could no longer be evil characters.
An assassin.
Right? They took PCs can no longer have an evil alignment unless they were magically changed into an evil alignment. You couldn't be anything worse than like chaotic neutral, which is interesting. So yes, but now 2E then introduced us to what book? The complete book of humanoids. And a complete book of humanoids all of a sudden gave you the official write-up to play monsters. And wasn't there an adventure where you could play the monsters?
There was a dungeon adventure or two about that.
Okay, I thought so.
Either you're protecting your dungeon, or there was another one where these monsters decided to band together as adventurers and go out adventuring.
So it's not like it's a new concept. Okay,
no, it's not.
The seeds were planted before. Heck, I remember having a half ogre in my party because it showed up in Dragon magazine. I think Roger E. Moore wrote the article. It was awesome, right? It's like, all right, well, you're gonna have to be, you have to be neutral as a half ogre, because half ogres have 19 strength. They were cool and took damage as large creatures, so it also didn't do very well, but it was there back in the early 80s. So humanoids as PCs, the thing is, these were always the exceptions to the rules with the blink, the wink of an eye. It's like, oh, it's an exception. Wink, wink. Here's the article in Dragon. Wink, wink. Or here's the book of humanoids. Wink, wink. Optional rules for your campaign. But optional rules were always like, what's an official publication?
Creature Crucible for basic D&D had top ballista. In there, you could play a Sphinx. And there are rules to how to play different monsters. It was what's the name of that winged monkey that D&D has? But anyway, you could play one of the. It shows you how to play one of those.
Oh, actually, that was really a winged. Well, it was a winged created monkey thing, I guess. Wow, I think I played a dragon FGU Swordbearer written by Dennis Astaire, which, by the way, Swordbearer. Really? Yes, wow. I own it. I own the Adventure to Dwarven Halls. Never ran the Dwarven Halls, but Swordbearer ran them with AD&D. I just love the aesthetics of the rules. I just never really got into playing them, but fun game. And if you go to North Texas, I don't know if he'll be there this year. COVID might be. He's gotten. I don't know. We'll see, but going to be.
He hasn't said he has. He isn't. He's part of the Austin group, so he may come.
Okay.
Richard LeBlanc says he can't come because of some medical.
I saw that. Yeah, he's got to have a procedure done with his heart. So I certainly have sympathies for that.
Wow. Didn't know he was that way.
Yeah. So I think we've come full circle. I'm very impressed with this. There are people who played Dragons and
Could
Balrogs, the
be.
original Blackmoor and Greyhawk campaigns, but no one thought that it was immoral to give those monsters a chaotic alignment. Well, and you know what? They were actually mentioned in the rules, right? For the original White Box, kind of mentioned player characters, but gives you no rules on how to implement it. So it's kind of like, yeah, if you do this, it's on you. And let's be honest.
That's the way Gary
really
said.
is,
One EDMG, the Gary, tried to talk you out of it.
where the hell is my speakers are doing this again? They're picking up my this is fun for you all at home. My speakers are somehow picking up my wife's Spotify account on the other side of the house. There we go. I don't want YouTube pulling me down because of a musical infringement. So let's get that. Let's get that out of there. All right. Well, I think we've gone. We weeds into the swamp and came out again. Oh yes, 2 weeks changed demons and devils to Bayatsu.
Remember that?
Yeah.
I know. I hated that because I couldn't remember the names.
We got to be a safer D&D. Like, okay. I don't know, Glenn. Do you think we covered it all today? I think we might have.
We covered a lot of ground.
We covered ground. Yeah.
And we're 2 weeks. Oh, and 2 weeks away from North Texas. Yes, folks, go to North Texas.
Glenn, I got a question for you. Are you in a game on Friday night at North Texas?
On what night? Saturday?
Friday night. Friday.
I'm running a game Friday night. I'm
all
running
right,
my Gangbusters game Friday
night.
All
right, so then we will have to punt the Dungeons, Dragons, and Discourse. That's okay.
Well, we could do it some other night. During that kind. My schedule is Friday. I'm running Gangbusters. Saturday, I'm playing an Astonishing Swordsman with Jeff Delaney.
Nice.
So that's my schedule. That's my whole schedule right there.
I've got a game on Saturday morning with James Shields, and I think that is my schedule right there. So
I cannot get away with going to that con. I should go to another con. I can't get away going there without running a Gangbusters game. Plus, Mark Hunt's going to be around, so
you're just a gangbuster. You bust the games, man.
He's going to probably run some. He'll run some Tall Tale too. I understand. He's a Western role-playing game.
Oh, that's right.
So there's that. I think I got 8 people in my Gangbusters here.
Oh, you'll have a lot of fun.
And then I may have to run it again for people who didn't get to play. Plus, I got a guy who wants me to run Mutant Future. Oh boy, even in open gaming, I just can't get a break.
Well, there you go. It'll be a lot of fun, man. It's going to be a great time, and I'm going to be off the grid with most of it. I may be helping out. I'm going to try not to get drunk.
They need to do karaoke there.
Oh, Rach would never leave if they did karaoke there. But let's not.
Oh, I'd love to do some karaoke at the con. In the bar, that'd be great.
God help us. God help us, each and every one of us.
I have a great voice.
Folks. Neither we're gonna wrap before we get into. But I want to say that neither Glenn nor I are medical professionals. But Glenn, you've been immunized, correct?
Yes, I have.
Yes, you have.
Yes, I have.
So you've been immunized. I've been immunized. I'm not saying that you should get immunized. You know your health situation better than anybody else. I am saying use your common sense to keep yourself, your loved ones, your family, your friends healthy,
right, David,
and safe. John, we'd love to see you at North Texas. Actually, next year, we may have Joe the lawyer at North Texas next year. So we may have
Wow.
We may have the whole Tenkar Tavern YouTube crew. Might be able to do.
Well, it depends on if I can. I gotta sock them some money to get next year's badges when I'm there. So if I have that,
sounds like a plan.
Anyway.
In any case, Glenn never misses. Please. I don't care what he says.
I missed last year.
So did I, because it was the year of COVID. 2020 didn't exist. Okay, 2020, you wipe it off your calendars. But you had to make your payments. But generally speaking, 2020 did not exist. Folks, be safe, be well. God bless each and every one of you, even Tiny Tim. Roll your dice, roll them well. And I'll be back tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Eastern, with my wife, Rach, as we do another episode of Gamers Health. Just as a side note, a year ago today, I was released from the hospital after having my first 3 stents. I had a fourth one like a week and a half later.
Good.
So this is what I look like after that. You too can look pretty healthy after you stare death in the face. So
you call this healthy?
Compared to, I guess, well, I'm not talking about mental health. Let's not go there. Wild Die, I'm sorry you missed it. We can watch the replay. Okay, it's there.
Yeah.
And listen, we maybe 2022 we'll have maybe we'll plan it now. We will plan a Tenkar's Tavern night at the bar at the hotel for that Thursday, and we'll do
I'll do that.
We'll do like an hour where I'll pay the drinks up to a maximum of 500.
Oh, I'll definitely do that.
All right, but no, top shelf liquor though. We got to do well drinks and beers. But in any case, I think that would be a lot of fun.
Well, as long as it's Boilermakers, I don't care.
All right, sounds like a plan. All right, folks, we're out of here. Later.
We are. Good night, folks.